Hello and welcome back to another Fancensus discussion. My name is Ryan, official fan of summer, and with me once again I have David and Alex. Remember to follow us for all coverage and analysis of gaming's top topics. Today, if you couldn't tell by our jazzy sunglasses, we're here to talk about the summer. Not just the heat wave that has recently happened that knocked everyone down for a few days, but rather gaming and its relationship to summer. Is it that games are played less? Is it that we see less releases? That tends to be the myth that goes around and has for years. So, guys, before we dive into that, how has your summer been so far? And what have you got coming up?
Watching a lot of the World Cup actually so far, but I'm glad it's cooled down because it was a bit unbearable last week.
It was horrid, wasn't it? I don't think I've ever financed myself so hard to get an air conditioning unit.
Yeah, I picked one up as well, but it still hasn't arrived because I have to imagine everyone in the country was doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, it was pretty widespread, that horror, wasn't it?
And it was one of those things I thought, well, I'll play some video games to, avoid going outside. But then I think I saw a news article somewhere that said you probably shouldn't play your games when it's at least 30 degrees in your room. So then it was like, great, can't do that. Never mind. So then it was, your options are limited, aren't they? Yeah, so on the subject, following the heat wave, we took inspiration and thought, let's tackle that topic that seems to come up from our clients often, which is, are gamers playing less during the summer? Is it that they, tend to be it's more of a winter or autumn or spring focused sort of hobby? And funnily enough, David, last year you actually did produce a report on this subject. So we thought that would be a great launching off point to have that discussion. So I suppose before we get into the data and you reveal all your findings, why do you think there is that sentiment, that opinion that gaming is less play, gaming is less of a go-to for a lot of people, or the industry as a whole? Why is it seen as that sort of window before we get to September onwards, for instance?
I think the common sense would dictate that with the majority of the population living in the northern hemisphere, that in the summer as we know it, that there's more things to do. The days are longer, the weather's better, there's more things to do outside, and I think there is that perception therefore that people spend less time playing games, but also watching TV, watching movies, etc. Like I say, we've got some data which shows that potentially that correlation might not be as obvious as you may think.
Yeah, I mean, do you think? I mean, it's the time for vacations and holidays, isn't it? As well, I think people. I mean, although people have their handheld devices, so I think that doesn't necessarily mean people aren't going to take them with them. But you're right. I think it probably stems from the fact that days are longer. There is far more you can do, a lot more outdoor activities. You're not limited to having to do inside things. But from my perspective, it definitely, I think that's been overblown, in my opinion. I don't know what you think on the topic, Alex.
I'm of a mixed bag, to be honest with you. I agree. All those things do make it sort of less appealing to sit down in the same seat and play similar games. But I also think there is, and there's always been, a big opportunity for, video game developers and publishers, companies to find ways to get people playing games when it is warmer in different ways, and I think they've been doing that for a long time. And I think especially in the last few years, we've seen some really interesting ways that they've been able to capitalize on that potentially somewhat untapped time of year. Unless the data we have says otherwise, because I've genuinely not seen it yet. So it may probably be the case that...
Surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, on that very subtle segue, should we hand over to David so he can then reveal?
Yeah, good point. So if we just look at the time spent gaming in the summer, and I think it's actually more interesting if we break this down across the age groups rather than as a whole, because I think looking at a whole across all gamers probably just cartoons it a little bit. So actually, amongst those particularly younger age groups of those 18 to 34-year-olds, more gamers spend more time gaming in the summer than they do less time gaming. So I think that potentially one myth dispelled. In terms of reasons for this, I think it's not just age as a factor here, but maybe lifestyle as well. particularly students in that lower age bracket, you can see it's actually quite a big difference between those spending more versus those spending less. May have more time on their hands in the summer overall. And whilst we talked about longer days as well, that could actually be a contributing factor overall. But you can see when we hit that sort of key age group of that late 30s, that is pretty much the same. The behaviour is generally similar. And as we get to those older age groups, we see a shift the other way. So those older age groups, those over 45s, are actually typically they would spend less time gaming in the summer rather than spending more time gaming.
Why do you think that is, that for the 18s to 24 in particular, where it's more than double, and you could say as well for the 25s to 34 bracket as well?
Yeah, I would say particularly in the older segment, I think there's disposable income at play here as well. Obviously, a life stage cycle here as well. A lot of people in those age groups have got families, holidays, vacations. We mentioned that earlier as well. Just generally wider leisure activities too. But taking that to another level, I guess what's interesting is not just if they're playing more games or they're playing less games, but they're playing different types of games as well. So this is a question we asked. And around half of all respondents said they played different types of games in the summer. And when say different types, mainly the focus there was playing different genres. So maybe genres which they don't usually play. Older respondents said they're more likely to play more casual games, whereas younger respondents said they're more likely to play what we call the more intense games, I guess more involved games. So perhaps, games where, does require a little bit more time on your hands to really sort of get under the skin of and really sort of, get involved in those games. So it is interesting, again, the age groups and how, we are seeing pretty much two contrasting behaviours there.
Would you say that psychologically people are happier during the summer, so therefore willing to experiment a bit more, as opposed to the winter when everyone's miserable?
True, and I guess in the winter you're probably just playing in the same room in the same place. I think in the summer you're likely to be a bit more mobile, maybe playing different rooms of the house, but also out and about as well. So I think that sort of comes into play. Those who play more actually are more likely to be RPG gamers, sports gamers, and fighter gamers. So again, that's quite interesting. RPG, perhaps games which require a bit more involvement. Sports games, which in terms of time, obviously, people who play those games, the likes of EA Sports, all those titles, obviously they're pretty involved. So yeah, it's interesting to see that those types of games do have sort of a tendency to increase in the summer, and they're less likely to be platform and puzzle quiz games. I think that's probably reflected in the charts we saw earlier by age as well.
I wonder if any of that's influenced just in terms of the concentration of releases in these genres. I mean, RPGs, there are a lot. I mean, at least 98% coming from Square Enix, it feels like sometimes. But then I think platformers are a bit more niche, aren't they, in terms of the number of releases you see? So I wonder if that has an impact on, the types of games that people are playing during the summer.
True. Yeah.
I mean, funnily enough, like random aside, but you were talking about gaming in different rooms of the house during the summer. If my parents weren't around, I would always remember taking our TV into the garden, the GameCube, and then just playing out in the garden, which A, would annoy my neighbors because I put the TV very loud, and B, would annoy my parents because they're like, why the hell are you taking the TV into the garden?
Let's you mentioned something there in terms of concentration of games, and I think we did see the slide pop up, but it is interesting to see the releases by season over the last couple of years, and I think since pre-COVID and COVID, we've seen quite big changes in how many games are released by season. So this is looking at titles which have had at least one review. So clearly, it's not as many as you see on Steam overall. But we're here at Fancensus, we're pulling data across all titles which have at least one critical review. which obviously reduces the number of titles overall.
So that's journalistic review, is that?
Yeah, journalistic review. So I get, just adding that extra layer of, credibility, really. So what we saw in 2024 was a dip in summer, and then obviously we're seeing a dip in winter. Autumn is always typically been, I think, apart from in sort of the COVID and lockdown period, autumn has always been that sort of key period, and we're going to see that again this year. We've touched on this already in a few of our social media posts lately of how important that's going to be, particularly from middle of September to the middle of October, and everyone avoiding November because of GTA 6. But you can see here we see a drop overall in winter 24, winter 25, and summer. I thought it was the third biggest season, in 2024, but in 2025 it edged up a bit, and that was partly due to Switch 2 releasing. So we had I think over 50 releases on Switch 2 over that period, so that helped prop it up a little bit. So it is interesting to look at the releases by season, and there are months where there is certainly a lull in the summer, but by no means, just because there's tends to be few releases, particularly in the months of July and August, it doesn't mean that there's not other things going on in the gaming industry. I mean, just look at the showcases, for example. If we look at the number of showcases we've had in June, I think, June is always, the beginning of June is always pretty exciting. Feel like as soon as Summer Game Fest here, we feel like, we've kicked off the summer, and we've got a whole host of showcases we had over that week, and that week, kicking off with the state of play, and this is something we've discussed on these sessions in recent weeks. But if we actually look in terms of number of titles, June, in terms of number of titles featured in just the key showcases alone, last year we hit well over 400 titles, which kind of dwarfs. It's almost just that month alone is the same as all the other months combined. So you can see how important it is. So the chat around gaming in the summer is perhaps as highest, or the excitement as highest as it is across the rest of the year. And obviously then we've got in August, at the end of August, we've got Gamescom and Opening Night Live. So things are going on. There might not be the same number of sort of key releases, particularly in those months, July and August, where a lot of people are on holiday, but we have those exciting announcements, which we've already had in a still sort of dominating conversation. We talked about it, like I say, a couple of weeks ago, these showcases, and some of the titles there we're starting to see release now as well. So
do you think that's by design, Alex, when it comes to releases? Because I suppose with these shows, it's about looking forward to the future and what's coming on the horizon and beyond. Do you think that attention looking forwards then means that there's less so on what's coming out at that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no wonder why there's so much in the middle of the year. It's because major release periods typically are sort of bookending sort of periods like that, and it's important to have that sort of reminder to general audiences and to potential buyers of games that more is coming, and to prepare themselves for when that's going to happen. So seeing that sort of refresh, I guess, of news in the industry does help push us along a bit to carry on through the summer, when we should. There is sometimes a lull in gaming, depending on sort of seeing the age groups and things like that. It's important to remember there is more coming, so we do have that larger advertisement period, I guess, as it were, when news is flooding out a bit more.
And to go back to your earlier point, David, about RPGs being the types of gamers that will play a lot more during the summer, do you think the type of release has an impact on the level of success it could see? Do you reckon certain games, certain franchises benefit more from releasing during the hotter months versus later on in the winter or early in the year?
Yeah, I think there's obviously the rhythm of those releases as well. And again, I think you mentioned earlier in terms of these showcases being by design. I think there's obviously a lot of thought goes into this. They use data like ours, look at previous success in the franchise. So I think there are obviously certain titles which are more likely to launch at a particular time of year. So do
any spring to mind from either of you in terms of games that you think have benefited from summer releases? Because the one that springs to mind for me is Splatoon. I think that series has tended to see summer releases because it's bright and colourful, has I think good cheerful vibes, and I think that works really well. It's the kind of thing where, say, with Sega, I could totally see Crazy Taxi being a summer release. I think that's the kind of game that would benefit, not being released during the colder months when there's also potentially more competition. But I was just curious if there's any others that you could think of that, you know, have come out in the summer that feel like a good fit.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning that there are certain companies that have sort of been better or getting better at sort of getting more prioritized on those summer periods and making experiences suited more to them. And I'm going to agree with you on the Splatoon one, absolutely. And I think in extension to that, Nintendo have done things in other areas as well, where they've really managed to, you know, capture the, I guess, to be too dramatic, I suppose, the feeling of summer in a way. Of course, we remember when Pokemon Go came out and things like, you know, and the slate of games that followed that, where people were going to be out anyway. Well, let's encourage them to use that product to game while they're doing that and do it in a communicative way, which just amplified the experience, and that captured the world for a little bit, really. And of course, you know, other than the mobile side of things, which is huge, I think there are games, and again, I'm going to have to mention Nintendo again, but there are games that are made almost to remind people to keep playing all times of year, including the summer periods. You know, series like the Animal Crossing games, where you will miss out entire parts of those games if you don't play or try playing all the time, every time of day, every month of the year. And there's not too many in that category, but there's a growing market of those outside of Nintendo as well. Especially in the sort of casual life farming genre. I think that's some of those, like we mentioned earlier, casual games sort of have that boost, and that might be a reason for that, is because people don't want to be heavily gaming in the summer. It's exhausting, like everything is, but if they're going to do it, let's do it in a fun, cozy way.
And David, the games you've all mentioned, the games you've all mentioned there are quite family orientated as well.
Yeah.
So you know, they aren't intense. They are, you know, almost accessible to all. And I feel, that does have a definite benefit there. And obviously we've got Power World with its full release, as well as a few others coming out. I think we're going to talk about that by the end as well. But I think that the family element definitely plays a role here.
David, do you think on the other side of it, though, with the introduction of games like Fortnite service games, do you think that has had an impact on people playing more during the summer, those types of games as well?
Yeah, and again, I think, we talk about age. Obviously, we start from 18, but I think then in that under 18 age group, absolutely. Some of those games, those live service games, like Fortnite, and hate to say it, Roblox as well. The gaming time spent on those is likely to increase. What we see is those who game more heavily anyway in the summer are likely to game even more, and it is actually casual gamers who are more likely to game less. So I think, particularly those younger age groups who are already gaming a lot and already gaming on these live service games, they're almost doubling down on that. And you probably see that, with my own kids, I see that. So yeah, absolutely. I think they've got more time to spend, particularly in the holidays, on these games, and that could be potentially to the detriment of some of the titles.
So we've talked a lot about previous summers. We're in the middle of summer. What does the output look like this year? We were already through June. We've had some notable releases, Star Fox being one, and then even today we've had Rhythm Heaven come out as well. Mecha Chameleon as well has just made headlines for just exploding on the internet. But looking at that list, I'd say there's a pretty solid lineup of bigger release. Okay, maybe there's not one there that's a big tentpole release for any system, but I'd say you've got some good, strong, bigger budget titles, and then you've got the support as well from those smaller indies that I think have managed to break through and become a bit more notable, like Big Walk or Denshin Attack as well, which I know got delayed from June to July. But are there any games on there, Alex, that catch your eye that you think could perform well or will stand out over this summer?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Big Walk was a big one there, and Mecha Chameleon. Those are two huge, what I'm going to call streamer games, right? Where you see groups of people playing online all together, all the time together. And it seems like there's almost a rolling list. There's always one that's the popular one of those right now. And despite it being, a hot time of year, people might be gaming less when they're older, like we saw earlier in the graph, and people might have other things to do. the time they do have to play together, it will be, you know, those cheaper India, if that's a word, and more communicative experiences like we had, like I said a minute ago, with Pokemon Go and things in the past, where there's something they want to do with friends that isn't going to exhaust them. Barbecues are very hot this time of year, and the beach can be painful. But just hopping online for an hour or two and playing a game that everyone knows they're going to enjoy, and it has not cost everyone an arm and leg, they're always going to be popular, especially at times like this. And then polar opposite, in the very cold times of the year as well, when they don't want to go out and have to go to the effort of dressing up, you know, in layers to go see other people.
I think it's a great variety on that list, to be honest with you, all those titles. You know, we talk about the family titles there, you know, titles which can be enjoyed by everyone. And there's a few more serious ones. There's a few sports ones, particularly, I guess, US sports-led titles on there as well. So, you know, these titles may not be quite as popular sort of on a global scale, obviously, the Madden and the college football. But yeah, the mix of indie titles, you know, the huge breakout titles like Mecha Chameleon, and you mentioned Splatoon Raiders as well. So I do think the variety of titles and pulling in all different types of gamers, from perhaps more casual gamers who don't like sort of the serious games to those really sort of intense, involved RPGs and beyond.
One thing I do notice on this list is, I mean, it does feel like all formats, PC, all the consoles are catered to in some way. What is interesting to me is that it seems like Sony has steered clear when it comes to their releases. Xbox have Halo, but then Nintendo, 3 of those games are from them. And then if you were to expand this out a little bit more to mid-September, you would also have Fire Emblem in there. So the company, you know, is really focusing a lot of their releases on the summer window. And of course, we have Ocarina of Time coming at some point, which I have to imagine will be October, November. But there is actually, I suppose, yeah, you've got the Marvel fighting game as well, which is, I think that's a PS5 console exclusive, isn't it? That,
yes, I believe so. And you might see on the list as well that Saros is there as well. That's a PlayStation exclusive, isn't it? Not Saros, sorry, that's Beast of Reincarnation I'm seeing.
Yes.
On the left-hand side.
Is that a PS5 exclusive?
Well, it's got the PS symbol. I thought it was anyway, but
I have to double check that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But if so, then yeah, I suppose they do have an exclusive, a couple of exclusives of their own, even though it's not necessarily their internal studios.
No, yeah.
But if you had to pick 3 games that, you know, if you was like, here's some money, pick 3 games, what would you two go for?
For me, I think I want to see what all the fuss about Mecha Chameleon's like. So again, probably jumping on the bandwagon there, just out of curiosity more than anything. Rhythm Heaven Groove is right up my street. Tend to be a bit more of a casual gamer. I'd like to try Star Fox, because I did try the original way back when. I wasn't a massive fan, but I think, you know, my tastes have changed, and obviously is an improved version. So I'd like to give that a whirl as well.
Good choices. Yeah. I have very fond memories of Assassin's Creed Black Flag when it first came out. That's one of the first Assassin's Creed games I think I finished. So going back to that is going to be a joy, especially with you know, the way it looks on all the trailers and clips we're seeing coming out. I love something like Big Walk actually as well, something that is quite a little bit slower paced or more personally paced. You know, I can sort of have a silly time in it with my friends or otherwise, and then come back later and I'm not going to feel like I'm sort of committed to spending a couple of hours playing it sometimes. For a third, I really don't know. I'm sort of veering a bit towards Mecha Chameleon as well, but then I feel like I'm sort of covering that friends aspect with Big Walk. Maybe Star Fox then. I did also played the original very briefly at a friend's house.
64 or the original.
I think it was 64. It wasn't with my time. And so I think just having to experience that in my time in a version made for the modern sort of consoles and audiences might be interesting.
Yeah, I do hope that.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. You speak over me. It's fine, David. Go on.
No, I was going to say anything on here from your point of view. You're a big Switch 2 gamer. I know you play games on everything, but I think pretty much everything what comes out on Switch 2, you want to see, you know, get a piece of. But is there anything here which might be a little bit out of your usual comfort zone which you might be tempted to have a stab at?
I mean, I tend to play whatever, really. I mean, you know, a lot of the branded ones there, I've played previous entries in those series, and then the ones that are not, like I would give them a go anyway. But if we're looking outside of the, say, Nintendo titles, Orbitals looks really cool. The split fiction style cooperative game that's coming out towards the end of the summer. I kind of want to play Halo because I never finished the original, so this seems like a good opportunity to actually put that to bed and actually complete that game. It's the same plans that I have with Ocarina of Time, where I've never finished it, and I feel like this is my last opportunity, and I have no excuse not to finish it now. But Big Walk is another one. I like those weird sort of community-driven sort of games where you just have a lot of goofy fun with people. So I think that would be another one there as well. But Beast of Reincarnation, I'm intrigued by, but I feel like that's lower down on the list because there is a lot of titles there that I do want to pick up and check out. And then that's before we even get to September, which, as we all know, is just crammed with other games, and a lot of those are ones that have definitely got my interest as well. So, yeah, I think overall that is a solid summer lineup. I think there is, as you said, David, something for everyone. A lot of it, okay, may not be for certain people, but there's at least one or two titles that surely, you know, will pique your interest and you can play over the summer there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of closing comments, you know, on the subject, David, what do you think of the main takeaways from the research that you did on the whole idea of summer and it being this quieter season?
Yeah, you know, we've obviously taken our insights from a number of different sources, from our, you know, consumer surveys, from Guru, from our, you know, our overall Fusion platform, where we're pulling in, you know, literally millions of data points every day. I think the contrast for me between the shifting gaming time between the younger age groups, the 18-25s in particular, and then the over 45s is really stark. And again, I think sometimes it's easy for people to talk about age, but I think life stage perhaps is more important than age. Number of releases is, like I said, in the summer it seems to be a little bit, well, volatile is the wrong word, but with, you know, everything that's happened since 2020, then Switch 2 releasing last year, it does seem to be a little bit less predictable. And obviously with September this year and GTA having, you know, just that knock-on impact of everything in the summer as well. So perhaps less of a clear conclusion there. Numbers of showcases is up in the summer compared to everywhere else, particularly number of titles. So again, we talked about that, but I think it really does nicely set the scene, I think, for not just the summer, but for September and October in particular. I know there was a lot of titles which were announced in June, which are due to come out in that period. In terms of social media activity, you find the number of influencer videos posted in the summer is actually higher than the spring in particular, but overall it sits bang at the average. But the average views per video increases, so people are actually watching more per video in the summer than they do the rest of the year. It's actually higher than anywhere else in the year. So that is quite an interesting stat. So social media input, you know, it's obviously omnipresent throughout the year, but, you know, the engagement in the summer actually tends to increase. And obviously from a unit sales point of view, or, you know, a commercial point of view, you know, sales do typically drop off. There is more competition for that dollar, I guess, overall outside of the gaming sphere, which is obviously one of the key drivers why we do see, you know, sometimes lower releases in the summer, because, you know, people are spending the money on other things and other leisure activities, which, you know, is perhaps why we see that reluctance. But yeah, it is a real mixed bag, and I think overall there are some positives to take out of this. You know, I think we started up front by saying that perhaps is that this myth or misconception that, you know, people generally game less in the summer, they're not as involved in gaming. But I think the data we've shown perhaps proves otherwise.
With all the gaming that you two do you find yourself playing more during the summer? About the same? Less?
I think for me it picks up a little bit more. I think a big driving factor of that, like we mentioned earlier, is family unit. My daughter has a holiday. It's summer holiday, so I stopped being able to sort of play something around her and get her interested in gaming. And I feel like I'm sort of more able to game if I'm able to move away from the console lock to the TV to outside other areas of the house as well.
For me, it's I don't really game in the summer. Too much else going on. I think for me, it's probably those darker nights. After the kids have gone to bed, so I'm almost sort of a classic case of that over 45s. So live stage. So yeah, for me, I do follow that trend. I think it is sort of winter, darker night gaming for me.
Keep saying darker nights as if it's sort of like something, sketchy. Are you okay? Is everything okay?
Yeah, I was reading an article about all the satellites going into space, and we're going to get lighter nights. So maybe that's keep those dark nights, guys.
And on that note, thanks to David and Alex for the healthy discussion. Zacchaeus for command control, basically keeping things running and also doing the numerous edits that I'm sure you'll need to do. This has been our first recording at home, as you probably see. We usually do this in the office, but currently we are between offices at the moment. So for the next few of these, we'll be continuing to do it in this format. But of course, any feedback you have, feel free to send it through. And if you would like a full breakdown of David's report around the idea of summer releases and summer gaming, then feel free to reach out, either give us a message on LinkedIn or drop us an email at info@fancensus.com. So yeah, next week we will be tackling a different subject. We're now halfway through the year, so we thought it would be a good opportunity to look back on the past 6 months of games and see which ones have stood out, which ones have seen great success, and perhaps maybe some that have struggled a little bit, and also look forwards over to the next 6 months, of course, where one of the subjects I imagine will be that small indie game GTA 6. But yes, until then, give us a like, give us a follow, and we'll see you in a week's time.